Hi, friends, and a very pleasant good day to you. Thank you for joining us for this edition of 15241 Today Talk. Jim Render and I are pleased that you're with us. Linda Dudzinski is our coordinating producer. Glenn Ward is our producer-director. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Tony Accamando with us today. A gentleman has done so much for not only Upper St. Clair, but for our great country as well. Tony, I'm so pleased. Jim and I are pleased that you're with us today. I guess we first met when my son David, maybe 30 years ago, was playing Little League Baseball, and you were his coach, and he thought highly of the man that you were then, and I'm sure he would be honored to have an opportunity to spend time with you today. Let me zero in first of all on the shirt that you've chosen to wear, service dogs, and I noticed on the back it's number 22. Is there any significance to that number?
You're pretty perceptive.
Sometimes.
Lanny, and thanks very much, Jim and Lanny and Upper St. Clair for having me here. You're too gracious with your praise of me, but thank you very much. But to answer the question, the number 22 is significant in that 22 veterans a day commit suicide, which is just an incredible number. It may be down now to 21 or 20, but that number, and it's because of the difficulty that an all-volunteer military has with multiple deployments. So in the main, someone in the military might train for 8 or 9 months and then be deployed for another 8 or 9 months and come back and train and then go back and be deployed. And of course the strain on the family and the strain physically, of course, being in the military, with the roadside bombs, particularly the terrorism that's part of the Middle East military conflict, has inflicted an awful lot of pain in these individuals. Even veterans as far back as Vietnam are committing suicide for some reason. And I think part of the reason is because our community, our nation as a whole, has not figured out how to get their arms around these veterans as they come back. It's easy to send someone off to war, but a little bit more difficult to embrace them whenever they come back and understand the difficulties that they have. So the number 22 was significant, so we launched this little initiative, which was an outgrowth of the work we had done in Vietnam, to try to raise money for 22 veterans to be paired with 22 service dogs in 22 months at a cost of $22,000 apiece. So these service dogs are highly trained, and they are able to mitigate anxiety, fear, anger, depression. If medication is needed, these dogs come and help these veterans. And the organization with which we associate ourselves, Guardian Angels Medical Service Dogs, is located in Williston, Florida. And they've given about 250 dogs out so far, and there have been no suicides and only one divorce. So these dogs are remarkable creatures and really help out an awful lot.
We'll have an opportunity to talk a great deal today about your commitment to the military. You served for 2 years. How long, and you were in Vietnam, for how long were you in Vietnam?
1 year in Vietnam, which was the case for almost everyone. The Marines served 13 months, everyone else 12 months, unless they re-enlisted. And that was a wonderful thing. It was a difference from World War II, for example, and the respect that you need to give to the World War II veterans, many of whom are gone, very few remaining with us, and their legacy and their commitment to this great country. But when they went off to war, they didn't know when they were coming back. They were coming back when the war was over. But in the case of Vietnam, you knew that if you were there for 12 months and survived, you'd return. Again, the Marines for 13 months. That was my 1 year commitment there, and then 1 year outside of Vietnam, and then I got out of the Army.
What was your rank, and what did you do in Vietnam?
I was a second lieutenant. I went to Duquesne University and received a commission upon graduation, and served in the Da Nang area. I was attached with the 1st Marine Division, and in 1967.
Why Why do you think, Tony, this has always intrigued me, why do the Vietnam veterans, they've never gotten the credit or the respect after they've come home? Why do you think that happened in our country?
Well, to some degree, it's because of what we're experiencing today. There's an awful lot of social unrest in our nation today, and some of it is very difficult to get our arms around it, particularly if one is patriotic and loves the nation and understands that there are warts on our nation just as there are warts on our bodies. No nation, no person is perfect, and over the years it seems that patriotism has not really been taught and endorsed by parents and schools. But to your point, the Vietnam War was very unpopular, as you know, and there was a draft then. Say right now there's all volunteer military, so anyone in the military is there because they want to be there, to their credit and to our credit. But the draft was in existence, and the war went on, and it was the first television war as well. So that something that happened on a battlefield today, that evening, or certainly the next evening or the next morning, those scenes could be shown with Walter Cronkite doing the commentary from Vietnam. So the carnage was seen on TV. And it was a very difficult war. It was similar to the Revolutionary War, really, or no uniforms in many respects with the Viet Cong. The North Vietnamese Army, of course, had their uniforms, but it was a difficult war to fight, and it went on for almost 10 years, and it was the first war that was fought not so much for territory, but for body count. So in other wars, a military unit would move forward and capture territory, and occupy it, and move forward and get more territory. In Vietnam, it was different in that a battle was fought and territory was taken, and then it was abandoned for whatever reason. So it became a war of body count, and so it was difficult to get your arms around it. And then many young people didn't want to go to Vietnam, and so the protests happened. And because of the unpopularity, when Vietnam veterans came home, mostly they didn't even say they were Vietnam veterans. They just took off their uniforms and went about their business. And because, as you said, Jim, the welcome was not a very cordial one, and that's okay. I mean, that's just you don't go in the military for people to clap for you. You go in the military, I guess, because you believe in the country and the aims. And to a great extent, it seems that, again, with all of the faults that maybe our country has, just like individuals, we have been a global force for good, which is the motto of the United States Navy. And we've done, I think, so much good around the world in the name of freedom and protecting people. So one of the good parts, I think, of the fact that the Vietnam veteran was not welcomed home is that now our country is able to get their arms around the veteran in a different way, even not enough, in my opinion, because we don't understand the needs of the veteran, but we're able to separate the war from the warrior now anyway. So I think that people are more likely to thank members of the military in an airport or a restaurant rather than give them some deriding remark.
Now, you returned to Vietnam 5 times, and you raised a lot of money and started a school and a hospital over there. Can you talk a little bit about your efforts?
Surely, be happy to. In 1997, 30 years after I was there, I wanted to return to Vietnam just to see the country at peace rather than at war. And I went back with my very good friend George D'Angelo, who was also there in 1967. And George was in the Air Force, flew the F-4 Phantom jet there. And so the two of us went back and was incredibly moved by that experience. The Vietnamese are wonderful people, very warm people, and we were welcomed there. It wasn't as though we were defeated enemies. The Vietnamese were very, very welcoming to the two of us and other Americans. We came back, and it was a pretty good experience. But while we were there, we were up in the Central Highlands, up in this little schoolyard, and it was raining, and the thatch roof was leaking, and the desks were broken, and the blackboards were broken, and these kids were all muddy in their uniforms, and we just looked at each other and we said, boy, wouldn't it be something if we could build a school here? Just an off the top of the head remark. But when we returned home, we gave it a little bit more thought, and we said, hey, let's try to do that. So we found an organization called the Vietnam Children's Fund that was building schools. They had built 4 schools in Vietnam, and it was named and founded by Lou Chesty Puller, son, Lou Puller Jr., who was a Marine, and he stepped on a landmine in Vietnam, lost both of his legs and the use of both of his hands. But he went back to Vietnam and built the first school in Dong Ho, which is up near the demilitarized zone. And we were in touch with his organization, and we said, if we could raise the money, it was $50,000 at the time, could we build a school in Da Nang? And they said yes. So we did it. And it was on Veterans Day, November 11th, 1998, that we had a little breakfast in downtown Pittsburgh with 32 people to kick off the fundraising. And 1 year later, the school had been built, and we returned to Vietnam with about 15 individuals, some veterans, some kids, some women, non-veterans, and dedicated the school. And it served 600 students, 2 shifts. So on the way back, these individuals said, hey, what a great experience it was. Why don't we do some more in Vietnam? So we started an organization called the Friends of Da Nang. And we've been, even till today, raising money for humanitarian projects, primarily for children in the port city of Da Nang. And Upper St. Clair has been a very big part of it. Fort Koch Middle School donated money for the school. And then a medical clinic, which was 2 years after that, was built. We went back again on Veterans Day. And the Upper St. Clair football boosters, thanks to Jim Render, and the football boosters gave money and supported that clinic. So it was just a desire, in a sense, to make some good out of something that perhaps was bad, the war. And again, I have to stress that the Vietnamese love Americans. Not so much the French, not so much the Russians, but they put the war behind them. They look forward, not backwards.
How was it that you've had a career, you've raised a family, and yet you've also found time to make the commitment and put in the time to do what you've been doing as it relates to your time in Vietnam?
I don't know exactly why, other than, and this sounds strange because I was also in the cable television business. So Philadelphia once served Upper St. Clair, and I was part of it. I started my career right here in Upper St. Clair and in Bethel Park and surrounding areas. So I was in the cable television business for 32 years. And I suspect that my answer to you is that the time element is I almost never watched TV, which was unusual because I was in the TV business. So I guess that's the only answer that I could give you, Lanny, that I felt it was necessary, and I just try to find the time. I didn't do anything other than what other people have done with their lives either, just decided to do that.
You were talking earlier about patriotism and certainly what a great country we have here. What lessons can we take from that, and how do we now pass on to the next generation and generations after that about how important it is to be patriotic and to make the commitment necessary to our great country?
And that's a great question, and I don't know that I have the answer. I think that, of course, Jesus at one point said, go teach all nations. So there were nations before, and I suspect that there may be a movement to have a different type of world order where there are no nations and no borders and what have you. So there seems to be less emphasis, and this is not a political statement, but just a statement of reality, on the part of some people, that there should not be nations as they are and with borders as they are. And I really can't speak to that, but it just seems to me, with respect to the United States of America, that that patriotism is needed to perpetuate this the greatness of our nation. And I don't know that's being taught even in the homes, and it may not be taught in the schools. I mean, there was a time whenever the Pledge of Allegiance was said every day in school. I don't know that that is the case now, just as there was a time whenever you said a prayer before class, or else you said something in silence. You weren't forced to pray. But some of those little things seem to be escaping us. I remember my father, I was born in 1944, so the following year, 1945, about 14 months after I was born, the end of the Second World War came. And so as I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, I was building model airplanes. I remember I loved model airplanes. And my father certainly encouraged these little plastic model airplanes you put together. And I was able to build any plane at all except the Japanese Zero and the German Messerschmitt, because those were the enemies in the Second World War. And my father said, "This is the United States of America, and you're an American, and those were our enemies. Now they're our friends." It's interesting, huh? That oftentimes you need to go through war to become friends with a nation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with patriotism. I think that it's just like yourself. One can be very strong opinionated and want to do the very best for yourself or your family, but we also need to be humble and recognize that there are other individuals and families, so we need to give them respect. So I think we can strive to be a great nation, as other nations may want to be great as well, and then have respect for each other. But I think we have we are a beacon of hope for so many. And we have a melting pot here. We have more immigrants in this country than any other nation, maybe combined, on an annual basis. So the experiment it is not over, that's for sure, but it takes an awful lot of work, to make it succeed.
Most appropriate that we're taping this show July 6th, after the celebration of the 4th of July weekend. You seem to be a patient, understanding man. Do you? And yet, is there an anger boiling inside of you about some of what you've experienced as it relates to our country and our patriotism and our understanding of what this great country is all about?
Well, that's an interesting question. You almost have to ask my wife. I mean, sometimes she refers to me as a hot-blooded Italian or a hot-headed Italian. So maybe I come off as being patient. I try to be, but maybe not all the time. And I want to say perhaps yes. I'm always reflective of the motto of the United States Special Forces, the Green Berets, the Special Forces. De libero oppresso. It's to free the oppressed. To free the oppressed. That was Latin. And I don't know that there's another military unit in the world that has as its motto, to free the oppressed. And here we are, a country with so much military might that we could indeed conquer nations, if you will, and plunder nations and colonize nations, all of which we didn't do. We were colonized ourselves. And and certainly we've made mistakes, I suspect. But in terms of helping the human condition around the world, I think the United States of America has led the way, and the military has protected that way, and has protected, I believe, and you go through many, many wars, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And not that we do things for recognition. We shouldn't do that. We need to be humble as individuals and maybe as nations also. But I think we have to let the banner wave and respect it. I'm perplexed, about the flag, the disrespect for the flag, or the disrespect for one's ability to say one's piece and freedom of speech. And I'll defend anybody's right for freedom of speech, and I would put the uniform on to defend that. They say anything that they want. But then along with that comes the respect of other people's speech as well. And I think we need to get to that as a nation, to come together and to forge ahead and lead the way. It's amazing that still so many people want to come to this nation if it's such a bad nation. I happen to think it's a pretty good nation.
Mm-hmm.
You've used the word humble a couple of times here today. And I think you might be the epitome of humble, Tony. I'd like to go back to Adelphia Cable for a few minutes. The humble part is that you were huge in developing that company. And Mr. Regas, who was the owner, put a lot of faith in you, and Adelphia Cable you built to a big, big force. And I'm certain a lot of our viewers remember Adelphia Cable. Maybe the younger ones don't, but the older ones do. And you also, along that line, provided a great thrill for me. When I was the head coach of the Big 33 game in 1993, the television contract had expired, and it wasn't going to be on television. And as I recall, Mr. Regas stayed a little longer at a graduation party at your house, waiting on me to show up. And we kind of meshed with a friendship there. And as I recall, Mr. Regas and you bought some extra lights at Hershey Park Stadium, and we had that game on television. For those football fans out there that remember Ron Paulus, who was a great Pennsylvania quarterback and went on to start Notre Dame. Paulus was our quarterback, and this was the first year that we renewed the game with the state of Ohio. And as a little side note, Joe Paterno came up to me the night before the game, and he said, because they were about to enter the Big Ten. And Joe says to me, Jim, it'd be helpful if you won this game to help get us started in this rivalry. Thanks, Joe. I didn't really need that pressure, but...
And did you win it?
Yes. Okay. And it was televised. And I'm not sure about my facts, but I think it was probably the largest attended Big 33 game ever. There was about 22,000 people at Hershey Park. And of course, Tony and Adelphia Cable provided a lot of other people access to that game. So, Mr. Humble, you deserve my thanks for your work with Adelphia Cable.
Thank you, Jim. I mean, that was an easy call. I mean, it was a big game for Pennsylvania and a bigger game for you and our players in it. So it was an easy call, and I was able to do it. And Adelphia reached out, and Mr. Regas made that happen. Yeah, and Adelphia was a great part. I mean, now people think cable television, the acronym was CATV, Community Antenna Television, which is just what we're doing today, Community Antenna Television. And when I started with, it wasn't even Adelphia at the time, we had only 12 channels, 2 through 13, and it was $4.75 a month. And now look, there are over hundreds of channels, and who knows how much everybody pays for it.
Yeah,
so
the price went up.
Price went up, exactly. But another thing one of the greatest things from my point of view with respect to Adelphia was the opportunity. And it was really Bill Pope, superintendent of the school, to a great extent, that got me to move to Upper St. Clair, along with my wife's uncle, George Bulger, a great man in this community, George Bulger, one of the finest men, to move here. And so we would always be part of the parade in Bethel Park, but with Bill Pope, we coached soccer, and David, and what have you. But we had the opportunity, and Mr. Regas, I said, hey, how about this idea? And it was to put flags on the poles right down here in McLaughlin Run Road. And every other pole had an American flag, and the other pole had an Upper St. Clair flag. And that was just a great thing. Just, again, a little touch of patriotism for this great community here.
Tell us about your children. You have 4, right?
I have 4.
Names and where are they and what are they doing?
Anthony is the eldest, married, lived for the longest time out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, but pretty much an outdoorsman and now lives in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Married, no children. Matthew, married, 3 children, lives in Peters Township. Brian, my daughter, married, 3 children, lives in South Fayette. Justin, married, has 1 son and another one on the way. So we're blessed with 4 children and 7, almost 8 grandchildren. All the grandchildren close by.
How much of what you've talked about today, how much do you find yourself sharing your wisdom with your grandchildren?
That's an interesting question, Len. I never really thought about it. I always go by that adage, I guess, actions speak louder than words. So to some extent, maybe they see what I do rather than what I say. Although I try to give them just little pearls of wisdom, I guess, that maybe they'll hang on to, little things. And the one that I try to stress most with all of them is easy is bad and hard is good. Poppy, what's that mean? Easy is hard. I mean, easy is bad and hard is good, because if easy was, everybody wants to do easy, but it takes difficult things. You know, you have to make yourself work hard or study harder, and it's not always easy to do that. So you want to extend yourself beyond yourself.
Tony, before we finish up here, I'd like you to tell our audience, if they wanted to be involved with your Service Dogs project, what's the first step, or where do they mail the contribution, or how does that work?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, the easiest thing to go to is to our website, which is not all that slick and all that good, but it's PA Dogs for Veterans. And if you go to that website, it'll direct you to be able to make donations. We've raised enough money for almost 75 dogs. We've paired about 33 so far, and the Steelers have given us money. As a matter of fact, we had a pairing of a dog during the Dallas Pittsburgh football game 3 years ago, right down on the field. The Pirates also have paid for a dog. They've had us on the field 3 different times. It's a wonderful organization, and it's an opportunity for people to give of themselves to veterans. So that's probably how they can do it.
That was PA Dogs for Veterans.
Yes.
You should-
.com. Yeah.
You should have stayed on the field when you were at the Pirate game and played a little bit.
I don't know. I couldn't move quite as fast as we once did. I was never a star athlete. I think I was sort of an average athlete. And in part, that was a good thing for me, because it made me want to strive for excellence in other endeavors.
Well, this show that Jim and I have been doing, one of our goals has always been to trumpet Upper St. Clair. We think highly of the community, and but the community is only as good as the people that are a part of it and make a commitment to all the good things and what is right, and making a commitment to the hard things, to as in your words. Tony Accamando, thank you very much for being with Jim and me. We sincerely appreciate it. You're a great guy, and we've been honored to have you on our show.
Well, it's been an honor for me to be here, and you hit on a key part of our country is community. It's bringing people together, and Upper St. Clair is a wonderful community. And of course, to have safety and good schools and good parks and all the rest of it, the kinds of things that most people would like to have, we've been blessed to have right here. And it's because of commitment. Look, about commitment. You two could be out playing golf right now instead of sitting in front of these microphones doing this. And so you're to be commended as well as Glenn. Linda.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks very much
Thank
for
you,
having
Tony.
me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
15241 Today Talk. Thank you very much for joining us. Our coordinating producer, Linda Dudzinski, and our producer director Glenn Ward. Thank you for joining us.